Forget what you learn about the cradles of civilization before the pyramids rose in Egypt, before Sumerians etched cuneiform onto clay. Another culture thrived in the heart of Europe, reaching astonishing levels of sophistication. We're talking about the Vinca civilization, flourishing along the Danube River basin in modern Serbia, Romania, and Bulgaria between 5700 and 4500 BCE. That's over 7,000 years ago, millennia older than the established beginnings of complex society taught in schools. Its settlements housed thousands. They pioneered copper metallurgy and developed intricate art and symbolism. Yet this vast and ancient European civilization is often relegated to footnotes, if mentioned at all. Why? Why is a culture that built large towns, mastered metalworking, and potentially developed the world's first writing system so conspicuously absent from the grand narrative of human history? This isn't just an academic oversight, it's a fundamental distortion of our past. We'll investigate the evidence, the discoveries that challenge established timelines, and explore the uncomfortable possibility that the story of civilization's dawn hasn't just been incomplete, it's been deliberately suppressed. The Vinca weren't primitive hunter-gatherers, they were pioneers, whose legacy demands re-examination. The story begins not with myth, but with mud and meticulous excavation. In 1908, Serbian archaeologist Milo Jovasic started digging at Belo, a tell site, an artificial mound created by millennia of human occupation, right on the banks of the Danube, near Belgrade. What he uncovered wasn't a minor Neolithic outpost, but the remnants of a sprawling proto-city. Layer upon layer revealed a society that persisted for over 1,000 years. These weren't simple huts. Excavations across numerous sites like Pločnik, Tartara, and Turdas revealed planned settlements with densely packed rectangular houses, often featuring multiple rooms constructed using sophisticated wattle and daub techniques with timber frames. Some settlements grew to cover dozens of hectares, suggesting populations in the thousands. Urban centers by Neolithic standards. Evidence points to organized communities with specialized areas, workshops for pottery and tool making, granaries indicating surplus food storage, and distinct living quarters. The sheer depth of the cultural layers at sites like Belo, Brdo, exceeding 10 meters in places, testifies to stability, longevity, and a level of social organization previously thought impossible for Neolithic Europe. This physical evidence directly contradicts the narrative of scattered, primitive farming groups. The Vinca weren't just builders, they were innovators, particularly in metallurgy. Excavations at sites like Pločnik unearthed evidence of copper smelting dating back to around 5500 BCE. This isn't just early metal use, it's potentially the earliest evidence of copper smelting anywhere in the world, predating similar developments in the Near East by centuries. They produced sophisticated copper tools, heavy axes, chisels, awls, needles, and fishhooks, indicating not just ornamental use but practical application in crafts and daily life. This technological leap required complex knowledge of ores, high-temperature kilns, and casting techniques. Simultaneously, their ceramic technology was unparalleled in Neolithic Europe. Vinca pottery is renowned for its highly polished, dark, burnished surfaces, sophisticated shapes, and thin walls, fired uniformly in advanced kilns, capable of reaching controlled high temperatures. This wasn't rudimentary pottery. It was mass-produced, high-quality ceramic ware. Furthermore, extensive trade networks are evidenced by materials found far from their origin. Obsidian tools traced to the Carpathian Mountains, and highly prized spondylus shells imported from the Aegean or Mediterranean Sea, hundreds of kilometers away. This interconnectedness speaks to a dynamic economy and complex social interactions spanning vast distances, far beyond the stereotype of isolated Neolithic villages. Perhaps the most revolutionary and controversial aspect of Vinca culture lies etched onto thousands of artifacts. The Vinca symbols, discovered on pottery figurines, spindle whorls, and small clay tablets found across the region, these markings constitute a complex repertoire of over 700, potentially up to 1,000 distinct signs Dating often commences around 5300 BCE. These symbols significantly predate Mesopotamian proto-cuneiform around 3400 BCE and Egyptian hieroglyphs around 3200 BCC. The symbols range from realistic depictions of animals and plants to geometric shapes like crosses, swastikas, chevrons, and spirals, alongside numerous abstract linear signs. Crucially, these marks often appear in organized sequences, particularly on artifacts like the famous Tartaria tablets discovered in Romania, which show partition lines containing distinct symbols. They are not random doodles. They display standardization across different sites and over long periods, suggesting a shared system of meaning. The density and repetition of these symbols strongly suggest they move beyond simple identification marks or decorative motifs. The critical question arises: could this be the world's oldest form of writing, or proto-writing? The implications are staggering. If the Vinca symbols represent a system for recording language or information, it rewrites the foundational chapter of human literacy, placing its origins squarely in Neolithic Europe, not the Near East. Scholars like Maria Gimbutas champion the idea of Old European script, arguing the Vinca system was a genuine precursor to writing. Linguist Harald Harman has extensively documented the symbol inventory, arguing for its systemic nature and potential logographic or ideographic functions, possibly used for religious or economic record-keeping. Evidence supporting this includes the standardization of signs, their appearance in structured sequences, and their presence on objects associated with ritual or administration, such as seals and tablets. However, mainstream archaeology and linguistics largely dismiss these claims. The prevailing counterargument is that the Vinca symbols lack the clear syntactic structure and direct link to spoken language necessary to qualify as true writing. Skeptics argue they are likely ownership marks, religious symbols, decorative motifs, or rudimentary counting systems, lacking the complexity of later scripts. The lack of a Rosetta Stone equivalent makes decipherment impossible currently, allowing skepticism to persist. But does the inability to decipher negate the possibility of a system, and why the resistance to even classifying it as sophisticated proto-writing? The dismissal of the Vinca symbols is symptomatic of a larger pattern, the persistent marginalization of this significant culture within mainstream historical narratives and institutions. Despite decades of compelling archaeological evidence, vast settlements, pioneering metallurgy, complex art, extensive trade, and the controversial symbols, the Vinca rarely feature prominently in university curricula, major museum exhibits on ancient civilizations, or popular history books. Funding for archaeological research in the Balkans often lags behind that directed towards established cradle regions like Egypt or the Near East. Artifacts are sometimes misdated, downplayed, or interpreted through theoretical frameworks that assume Near Eastern primacy. For instance, early copper artifacts were initially dismissed as later intrusions or imports until stratigraphic evidence and direct dating prove their Neolithic Vinca origin. This isn't merely academic caution, it reflects a deep-seated Eurocentric bias within historical disciplines, a legacy framework established in the 19th and 20th centuries that prioritized Greece, Rome, and their Near Eastern precursors as the sole originators of significant European culture and progress. The Vinca narrative fundamentally challenges this linear progression, suggesting a major independent European center of innovation millennia earlier. What motivates this apparent suppression or neglect? Several factors likely intertwine. Firstly, academic inertia plays a role. Challenging long-established paradigms requires significant effort and can be professionally risky. Textbooks and curricula are slow to change. Secondly, geopolitical biases, both historical and contemporary, may influence funding priorities and the perceived importance of different regions' histories. The Balkans have often been viewed as peripheral by Western European and North American academic centers. Thirdly, protecting the traditional narrative of civilization flowing linearly from the Near East through Greece and Rome to modern Europe serves certain ideological purposes, reinforcing a particular view of Western exceptionalism. Acknowledging a highly advanced, independent Neolithic civilization in southeastern Europe complicates this tidy story. It forces a reevaluation of diffusionist models, where all innovation spreads from one center, versus models and knowledge acknowledging parallel, independent developments. The existence of Vinca metallurgy and potential proto-writing demands a more complex, polycentric view of ancient innovation. The resistance isn't necessarily a conscious, centralized cover-up, but rather a systemic bias embedded within the structures of historical scholarship, funding, and education, making it difficult for challenging narratives like that of the Vinca to gain traction and appropriate recognition. Let's directly compare Vinca achievements with their contemporaries and even later more famous civilizations. In agriculture, the Vinca were early adopters of the Neolithic package originating in the Near East, cultivating domesticated wheat, barley, oats, and legumes, and raising cattle, pigs, sheep, and goats. Their large settlements and granaries indicate successful surplus-generating farming economies, comparable to early settlements in Mesopotamia. Artistically and spiritually, the Vinca culture produced a stunning array of artifacts unlike any other. Thousands of anthropomorphic and zoomorphic figurines, often highly stylized with large eyes, elaborate costumes or masks, and incised symbolic patterns have been found. While often dubbed goddess figurines, their exact purpose remains debated. Idols, ancestor figures, ritual objects, they suggest a rich and complex spiritual life potentially centered around female deities or principles, a focus also seen in other Neolithic cultures but expressed uniquely here. Ritual vessels, miniature altars, and masks further hint at sophisticated ceremonial practices. This artistic output rivals contemporaneous cultures in quantity and complexity, demonstrating a distinct worldview and symbolic language far removed from primitive stereotypes. Their agricultural base was solid, and their spiritual artistic expression was profound and unique. Technologically, the Vinca advantage in early metallurgy, specifically copper smelting around 5500 BCE, is a critical distinction. While Mesopotamia and Egypt later excelled in bronze and iron, the Vinca were pioneers in the very first steps of pyrometallurgy, extracting and working metal from ore on a significant scale. This predates comparable Near Eastern evidence by centuries. Their mass production of high-quality ceramics also represents a technological peak for Neolithic Europe. The critical question is influence versus isolation. Did Vinca innovation spread? The Danube River served as a major artery for trade and communication. It's plausible that Vinca metallurgical knowledge diffused northwest into Central Europe. Similarly, the distinctive pottery styles and symbolic motifs may have influenced neighboring cultures. Some scholars propose connections between Vinca symbols and later Cretan Linear A script, although this remains highly speculative. Alternatively, the Vinca could represent a largely independent trajectory of cultural evolution that eventually faded. However, the sheer scale, longevity, and technological prowess make complete isolation unlikely. The evidence points towards the Vinca being a major node in a network of interaction across Neolithic Europe, potentially seeding ideas and technologies that later cultures built upon. Even if the direct lineage is obscured by time and lack of textual records, their technological head start remains a key piece of the puzzle. Around 4500 BCE, after more than a millennium of continuous development, the vibrant Vinca culture experienced a relatively abrupt decline and transformation. Large settlements were abandoned, pottery styles changed, and the characteristic figurines and symbols became less common. What caused the collapse of this sophisticated Neolithic society? Several theories compete, likely involving a combination of factors. Environmental change is a strong candidate. Paleoclimate data suggest a period of cooling and potentially increased aridity in southeastern Europe around this time, which could have strained agricultural systems dependent on stable conditions, leading to resource scarcity and social stress. Deforestation caused by long-term timber use for construction and fuel, especially for metallurgy and pottery kilns, might have exacerbated soil erosion and environmental degradation. Another prominent theory, popularized by Maria Gimbutas as part of her Kurgan hypothesis, posits invasions or migrations of horse-riding pastoralist groups from the Pontic Caspian steppe. While direct evidence of widespread conflict is debated, the arrival of new cultural elements associated with these groups coincides with the Vinca decline in some areas. Internal factors such as increasing social stratification leading to inequality, resource mismanagement, or internal conflict cannot be ruled out either. The very success and density of Vinca settlements could have sown the seeds of their own decline through pressure on resources. Understanding this collapse is crucial, as the fading of the Vinca mirrors the trajectory of many later civilizations. The erasure or marginalization of the Vinca civilization isn't just a historical injustice. It's a loss for our collective understanding of human potential and the diverse paths of cultural development. Rewriting history requires more than just acknowledging Vinca's existence. It demands a fundamental reassessment of timelines and civilizational models. We need to integrate the Vinca phenomenon fully into the narrative of European and world history. This requires concerted action, increased funding for systematic excavation and research in the Balkans, leveraging modern technologies like LiDAR, ground-penetrating radar, paleogenetics, DNA analysis of skeletal remains, and isotopic analysis to answer questions about origins, diet, migration, and social structure. Museums and educational institutions must update their exhibits and curricula to reflect the evidence, moving beyond outdated Eurocentric frameworks. Public engagement is paramount. Documentaries, online resources, social media campaigns, and community archaeology projects can raise awareness and pressure academic institutions to take Vinca seriously. It's time to challenge the gatekeepers and demand a more inclusive and accurate history. By amplifying marginalized narratives like the Vinca, we don't just correct the record, we decolonize history itself, questioning authoritative sources and embracing a richer, more complex tapestry of the human past. What other incredible stories remain buried, waiting for their turn to rewrite what we think we know?